I translate for $1,000. The millionaire heard and laughed. But that freezing night, a street boy would leave him speechless and change his destiny forever. The early hours in New York were cold enough to make the window glass shiver. Outside, the wind rattled the glowing panels, announcing flights to places Liam only knew from tourists' conversations. Paris, Dubai, New York, Tokyo, names that sounded like unreachable promises. Amid the endless lights and the metallic voices coming from the loudspeakers, the 12-year-old boy walked barefoot, balancing a box of candies on his arm. His worn-out jacket barely shielded him from the cold, and his curly, unkempt hair told the story of too many nights without a pillow. Still, there was something in his eyes, a deep, almost adult calm that contrasted sharply with the haste and arrogance of those who ignored him. Liam was a familiar face among the airport security guards and attendants. They knew he didn't steal, didn't beg, and sometimes surprised tourists by replying in English, French, or Spanish as naturally as if it were his own language. No one knew how he'd learned, and few cared to ask. But the boy carried a simple secret. He read everything he could find: menus, flyers, boarding instructions. He used the airport's public Wi-Fi to watch educational videos on broken cell phones he fixed himself. Knowledge was his only inheritance, and his only escape. That night, the terminal was quiet. A group of executives slept slumped over the leather chairs in the International Departure Lounge, while the distant hum of turbines echoed through the corridors. Liam was selling his last few candies when he heard loud laughter coming from the VIP area. A group of young men in suits, surrounded by drinks and arrogance, drew everyone's attention. "Hey, kid!" one of them shouted. "How much for the whole box?" Liam approached cautiously. 10 reais, sir." The man threw a 50-real bill on the floor. "Then pick it up, but use your mouth. That'll be more fun." Laughter sliced through the air. Liam lowered his head. Blood rushed to his face, but he didn't react. He picked up the money with cold hands and murmured a barely audible "thank you." Across the table, a man in a gray suit watched in silence. It was William Harrington, one of the most powerful businessmen in Latin American private aviation. Rich, influential, owner of an empire that carried his last name in golden letters. His eyes were sharp, the kind that expected obedience. "Leave the kid alone," he said flatly. "You've had your fun." The others laughed, and the moment passed. Liam walked away slowly, swallowing his shame. He stopped near a glass storefront and, staring at his reflection, whispered to himself, "One day they'll hear me speak, and they won't laugh." The clock read almost 3 a.m. when the atmosphere shifted. One of William's assistants rushed in, sweating and nervous. "Mr. Harrington, we've got a problem. The translator didn't show up." William looked up. "What do you mean, didn't show up? The meeting's in 30 minutes. His car broke down on the highway. He won't make it in time." William ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Those Arabs don't speak a word of Portuguese. I can't lose this deal. $70 million are on the line." The assistant froze, speechless. Then a calm, steady voice broke the silence. "I can help." Everyone turned. It was Liam, standing at the door with the candy box in his arms and an unshakable gaze. "I speak Arabic. I can translate." The room went dead silent, then burst into laughter. "You?" mocked one of the executives. "You probably barely speak Portuguese." Liam didn't flinch. "I can prove it." Without waiting for permission, he began to speak. The words flowed smooth and precise, a flawless classical Arabic that sounded almost musical. One of the security guards, a veteran who'd served in the Middle East, widened his eyes. "He's serious," the man muttered. "That kid speaks Arabic better than the company interpreter." William stared at him, still in disbelief. "Where did you learn that?" "My mother was a translator." She taught me the basics. The rest, I learned on my own, Liam said, lifting his chin. I can translate your meeting. And how much do you want for that, kid? One of the men asked mockingly. Liam hesitated for a moment, hearing the soft voice of his mother echo in his memory. One day, my son, you'll earn $1,000 honestly. That's the price of worthy work. $1,000, he said firmly. Not a cent less. The room exploded in laughter. One of the executives nearly spilled his drink. $1,000? You should be paying me to let you in there. But William didn't laugh. He studied the boy carefully. There was something about his composure, a quiet confidence, that disarmed him. $1,000, the businessman repeated. Do you even know what you're asking for? I do. It's what a fair man would pay for a job well done. William's eyes hardened. He was used to negotiating with sharks, not children. Still, something made him hesitate. All right, kid. He stood, straightening his suit. If you embarrass me, you'll regret it. But if you're as good as you think you are, you'll get your money. Liam nodded. Deal. The automatic door slid open, revealing the brightly lit hallway leading to the VIP meeting room. Liam took a deep breath, feeling his heart race. The distant roar of a departing plane echoed like an omen. As he walked beside William Harrington, the boy who lived off the airport's leftovers was taking his first step toward a destiny that would change everyone's lives. And for the first time, he didn't feel invisible. The glass doors of the VIP lounge slid open, and Liam stepped inside. The contrast hit him like a gust of warm air. Outside, the cold, the smell of stale coffee, the distant roar of turbines. Inside, silence, luxury, and expensive perfume. Thick carpets, soft yellow lights, and crystal glasses gleaming on a glass table. He took a hesitant step forward. His worn-out shoes squeaked against the polished floor. Every eye turned to him. Black-suited guards, executives in ties, waiters frozen in place, as if the boy's mere presence were an offense to that temple of gold and arrogance. William Harrington walked ahead, face unreadable. He didn't know if he was about to witness a miracle or make a fool of himself. This is where you prove you're worth $1,000, kid, he muttered without looking back. Liam nodded, holding his posture. His heart pounded like a jet engine preparing for takeoff. Minutes later, the automatic door opened again. 3 men in white robes entered, escorted by security. At the front was Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid, tall, neatly groomed beard, eyes sharp and commanding, moving with the confidence of someone who carried both fortune and tradition. Everyone stood. William stepped forward to greet him, forcing a diplomatic smile. Liam watched closely, reading gestures, pauses, and glances, as if every movement were a word unspoken. When al-Rashid turned to him, Liam took a step forward, placed his hand over his chest, and said in flawless Arabic, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and God's mercy be upon you. The silence that followed was absolute. The executives froze. William's eyes widened, stunned by the fluency and perfect pronunciation. For the first time that night, the Arab smiled. Wa alaikum assalam, wa alaikum assalam, he replied, curiosity glimmering in his gaze. A boy translator? Liam kept his composure. I'm not a translator, sir, just someone who prefers to understand before judging. The words rippled through the room like a stone dropped in water. Al-Rashid turned to William, intrigued. He speaks with wisdom, he said in Arabic, smiling. Liam translated seamlessly. He said you speak with wisdom, sir. William only nodded, quietly impressed. The meeting began. Liam took his place beside the table, posture straight, eyes sharp. He translated each sentence, each nuance, switching between Portuguese and Arabic with surgical precision. But what truly impressed them wasn't just accuracy, it was tone. He didn't repeat words, he conveyed meaning. When William spoke of numbers and investments, Liam adjusted his phrasing to reflect how Arabs valued trust above profit. When al-Rashid asked subtle questions, Liam softened the delivery to prevent cultural misunderstandings. Twice that night, Liam saved the meeting. The first time, when a Brazilian executive used an idiom that, if translated literally, would have sounded offensive in Arabic. Liam caught it and softened it on the spot, preventing a diplomatic disaster. The second time, when one of William's aides introduced an exclusivity clause that came across as aggressive. Without warning, Liam rephrased it as a partnership proposal. Hearing the new version, al-Rashid smiled and agreed. William didn't grasp right away what the boy had done, but he could feel the shift in the room. The tension had dissolved, replaced by something rare in business: warmth. During a coffee break, the sheikh watched the boy from a distance. "Man anta ya waladi?" "Who are you, my son?" he asked softly. Liam answered in Arabic, "Ana mujarradu walad yabhathu an fursa." "I'm just a boy looking for a chance." Al-Rashid studied him for a few seconds, as if searching his face for a memory. "You remind me of someone," he murmured in English. "Someone I met long ago, right here in this country." Liam smiled faintly, not understanding. William watched from across the room, curiosity tightening his chest. How does this kid speak like that? He wondered. And why does that Arab seem so interested in him? The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. When it ended, al-Rashid stood and shook William's hand. "I enjoyed our conversation, but I'll decide tomorrow. I like to reflect carefully," he said, then turned to Liam. "And I want this young man to be present again." William hesitated. "Of course, if that's your wish." As the Arab delegation left, the executives swarmed around the boy. "How did you do that?" one of them asked, still stunned. "You improvised during the translations?" Liam shrugged. "I just said what you meant, and what they needed to hear." William handed him an envelope, thick with cash. "Here's what we agreed on, $1,000. His tone was dry, but there was respect hidden in it. "And kid, be here tomorrow at 7. Liam met his gaze. "I can't promise. Depends on how much I sell tonight." "Sell later," William said, trying to sound commanding. "I need you." Liam gave a faint smile. People always say that when they realize they need someone they can't buy. Without waiting for an answer, he tucked the money into his jacket, turned, and vanished through the automatic doors. From behind the glass, William watched the boy disappear into the crowd. "Find out who that kid is," he ordered his assistant. "Name, family, everything." Meanwhile, inside his limousine, al-Rashid stared out the window at the same boy fading into the glowing corridors. He placed a hand over his chest and whispered something in Arabic. "Emily, could it be?" No one heard him. But that night, beneath the steel and glass roof of the country's largest airport, destiny began to weave its invisible threads. Dawn crept timidly over JFK International Airport. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the glass windows, blending with the artificial glow of the lamps. In the corner of an emergency stairwell, wrapped in a thin blanket, Liam slept. His head rested against his old backpack, his body curled up against the cold that lingered despite the morning light. In his dreams, the terminal transformed into something else. A wide, open field filled with color and wind, where a brown-haired woman read to him beneath the shade of a tree. "Listen carefully, Liam," she said with a smile. "The word is hope. Never lose it, no matter what happens." It was Emily Walker, his mother. In the dream, she looked alive, with that same gentle yet steady gaze Liam kept alive in every memory. "You can learn anything, my love," she told him. "Books are doors, and the world holds many keys. Study, even if no one else sees value in it. Knowledge is the only inheritance I can leave you." Liam woke with tearful eyes. The sounds of carts rolling and flight announcements once again filled the air. He looked around, took a deep breath, and pulled a folded, yellowed piece of paper from his pocket. The letter his mother had left before she died. The first lines were still readable. "If one day you feel alone, remember that love may be closer than you think. And if anyone ever speaks the name Harrington, listen with your heart." The rest was blurred, erased by old tears. Liam carefully folded the paper and tucked it away again. Outside, the world went on, indifferent. But elsewhere in the airport, William Harrington was awakening to a past he thought long buried. The businessman sat in his makeshift office inside the terminal, a wide room with windows overlooking the runways. He had spent the entire night thinking about the boy. From the moment Liam began speaking Arabic, something about him had unsettled William. It wasn't just the intelligence, it was his expression, his eyes. Eyes William had seen before. "Have you found anything?" he asked his assistant without looking up from the laptop. The man handed him a folder. "Yes, sir. His full name is Liam Walker. No record of a father. Mother deceased 3 years ago. Emily Walker, translator." William froze. The air in the room seemed to vanish. "What?" His voice trembled. "Say that again." "Emily Walker. Worked as a freelance translator. And before that..." The assistant flipped through the file. "At Harrington International Aviation, 12 years ago. She was dismissed while pregnant according to HR records." The distant hum of jet engines faded. All William could hear was the pounding of his own heartbeat. He stood up slowly, as if the floor beneath him had turned unsteady. The memory cut through time like a blade. 12 years earlier, Emily had walked into his office, a woman with a calm voice, flawless posture, and a light in her eyes he'd never forgotten. She was young, talented, and carried a rare kindness in a world ruled by profit margins. She was the one who had taught him to say thank you in Arabic, back when he could barely pronounce his own name without arrogance. For months, they'd worked side by side. Meetings turned into confidences, confidences into a quiet, impossible love. But William's marriage to Margaret, heiress to one of New York's most powerful families, had bound him in invisible chains. When Margaret found out about Emily, the pressure was relentless. "Her or your reputation," her father had said coldly. And William, a coward, chose the empire. He fired Emily on a rainy afternoon without even meeting her eyes. He still remembered her last words. "One day, what you destroyed will return to show you what truly matters." Now, hearing the name Liam Walker, everything made sense. The boy had her eyes, her calmness in the face of cruelty. William sat back down, covering his face with his hands. The weight of the years crashed down on him. "My God, what have I done?" he whispered. Meanwhile, across the city, Sheikh Khalid al-Rashid stood by the window of his hotel suite, watching the golden sunrise over New York. Slowly, he turned a gold ring on his finger. On the table beside him lay scattered documents and an old photo album, records from his past trips to Brazil. He flipped through absently until a single photograph stopped him. A smiling woman, serene eyes, holding a dark-haired little girl. Behind her, the Harrington Aviation logo. "Emily," the Arab murmured. The memory was vivid. She had been the translator during one of his visits years ago. That day, his daughter Amira had run off onto the runway as a plane was taxiing toward her. Emily had sprinted after the girl, pushing her away just in time. He had never forgotten that woman's name, Emily Walker, nor the determined light in her eyes. Now, looking at the photo, he saw it clearly. The boy translator had those same eyes. The same eyes that had faced danger to save a life. The same eyes that now spoke Arabic with a soul. The sheikh leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. So, "It's her son," he whispered. He called for his aide. "I want to know everything about the boy who translated yesterday, and make sure he's protected. Quietly." Back at the airport, Liam was once again walking between the gates, balancing his box of candies. The money he had earned was hidden in a tin can behind a soda machine, his secret vault. He had no idea that at that very moment, 3 powerful men were thinking about him. One, consumed by guilt. Another, driven by gratitude. And he himself, guided only by hope. As sunlight poured into the terminal, the loudspeaker announced another flight to Dubai. Liam looked up at the board, thoughtful. "Dubai," he repeated softly, a faint smile on his lips. Without realizing it, fate had just tied another invisible thread, binding his life to those who would change it forever. The past, dormant for 12 long years, had just awakened. The airport clock read 7:20 p.m. when Liam returned to the executive terminal. The cold cut through the air, but what truly froze him was a creeping sense that something was wrong. He had received the call from William Harrington only a few hours earlier. "I need you for another meeting with the Arabs." The man's voice had sounded oddly calm, almost gentle. Liam hesitated, but curiosity, and a strange feeling in his chest, made him accept. When he entered the VIP lounge, he immediately noticed something different. Fewer people, less noise. Only William, Sheikh al-Rashid, and 2 aides. On the table, fresh coffee, water, and an open leather folder. But it was William's expression that stood out the most. There was no arrogance, only a mixture of guilt and anxiety. "Good evening, Mr. Harrington," Liam said politely, though his tone remained distant. "Good evening, Liam," the businessman replied, his voice rough. "Thank you for coming." The boy sat down, silent, observing. The Arab smiled when he saw him. "Marhaban, ya ibni." "Welcome, my son." Liam returned the smile with respect. The meeting began, and once again the boy translated with precision, but something hung in the air. A quiet tension between the 2 men across the table. William barely spoke. Instead, he watched Liam, every gesture, every expression, as if trying to read a reflection of the past. The same eyes as Emily. The same slight frown when concentrating. With every sentence, every inflection, the resemblance became more painful. When the meeting ended, al-Rashid shook William's hand. "The investment is confirmed," he said with a smile, "and I must confess, part of my confidence comes from this boy. He's extraordinary." Liam translated the words, his cheeks reddening slightly. William only nodded, too moved to speak. The sheikh turned to Liam. "Come back tomorrow. I have something for you," he said, winking as if holding a secret. When everyone had left, William remained standing, silent. Liam picked up his candy box, ready to leave. "Wait," said William, his voice firm but trembling. "We need to talk." The boy looked at him warily. "About what?" "About your mother." The silence that followed was heavy. Liam froze. "What do you know about her?" "Only her name," William replied. "Emily Walker." The boy took a deep breath. "She died 3 years ago. She used to clean offices. Got sick." His voice faltered. "But before she died, she left me a letter." William swallowed hard. "A letter?" "Yeah." Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded, yellowed piece of paper, worn from time. "I never managed to finish reading it. It's torn, and the water erased parts of it." William reached out. "May I see it?" Liam hesitated, then handed it over. The businessman opened it carefully. The paper was stained and fragile. The first lines trembled beneath Emily's delicate handwriting. "My dear Liam, if this letter ever reaches the right hands, maybe you'll understand why your name carries the weight of both love and sacrifice. I've loved you from the very first moment, even when I was left behind. The man who gave you life never knew you existed. I spared him. His name is—" The ink ended there. The rest, blurred, unreadable. William felt the ground vanish beneath his feet. His heart raced out of rhythm. Emily. Pregnant. And I never knew. He pressed the paper to his chest as if trying to tear years of guilt from inside him. Then he looked at Liam, the innocent face, the steady eyes, the quiet demeanor. It was undeniable. The pieces fit together, cruelly. "Liam," he murmured, voice shaking. "Do you know who your mother was talking about? The man she mentioned?" "No," the boy replied. "She only said he was an important man. But that what really mattered was that I study. That one day, I'd earn the right to be heard." William took a deep breath, fighting the tears. "I need to confirm something," he said, standing up. "I want to do a DNA test." Liam took a step back. "Why?" "Because—" He stopped, voice breaking. "Because I might be your father." The silence that followed was deafening. Liam stared at him, speechless. Then he let out a nervous, bitter laugh. "Is this some kind of joke? You think I'm going to believe that?" "It's not a joke," William whispered. "And if it's true, I owe you more than any fortune could repay." The boy turned away. "People like you don't owe anyone anything." William stepped closer. "Give me a chance, Liam. Just one." Liam hesitated. His hard gaze softened, just a little. "Fine. Do the test, but I'm not expecting anything from it." The results arrived. William was in his office when the envelope was delivered. His hands trembled. He opened it, read the lines, and stood frozen for several seconds. The report was clear: 99.9% genetic compatibility. Liam was his son, but the secret didn't stay hidden for long. A lab employee, tempted by the value of the headline, leaked the information to the press. Within hours, news sites screamed the story. "Billionaire William Harrington has secret child with former employee." The bomb detonated. Harrington Aviation's stock plummeted. Shareholders demanded answers. Reporters swarmed outside the family mansion. At home, Margaret, William's wife, broke down. She answered calls through tears, denying what she saw on the headlines, until he returned and confirmed it with a single look. Their legitimate children revolted. "You destroyed our family for some street kid?" shouted the eldest. William said nothing. He was silent, the same silence that had followed him for 12 years, the silence of guilt. Meanwhile, back at the airport, Liam read the headlines on a borrowed phone. He saw his own photo, enlarged, surrounded by flashes and words he barely understood. Scandal, bastard, heir. For a moment, fear gripped him, but then he remembered his mother's words. "Love may be closer than you think." And for the first time, he understood what she meant. The days that followed were chaos. The press showed no mercy. Headlines plastered Liam's face alongside the name Harrington, as if destiny itself had decided to turn a secret into a public spectacle. Street boy revealed as billionaire's son. Scandal shakes the aviation empire. An unlikely heir emerges in New York. While the world buzzed with gossip, Liam hid in the shadows of the airport, the same place that had always sheltered him, now watching him with curiosity. People whispered when he walked by. Some looked at him with pity, others with admiration. But deep down, all he wanted was to disappear again. All he wanted was peace. Across the city, William Harrington fought to keep his company afloat. Emergency meetings, furious shareholders, lawyers calling every hour. But amid the noise, he could only think of one thing, the son he hadn't learned to love in time. He tried to find him. He went to the airport several times, bringing coats, food, even books, echoes of Emily. Liam avoided him. One night, they finally met in the empty terminal hall. "Why are you running from me?" William asked, his voice weary. Liam's tone was cold. "Because you had everything. I had nothing." William fell silent. "You're right," he said at last. "I failed you, and your mother. But I want to make things right." Liam stared at him for a long moment, his eyes moist, but his pride unbroken. "Make things right? That doesn't buy back the nights we went hungry, or the times she cried." "I know," William replied, his voice heavy with pain. "But at least let me do one thing right before the end." Liam turned to leave, but something in William's tone stopped him. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to help me," the man said, "as a translator, as the genius you are." Liam laughed bitterly. "Genius? I sold candy. And you spoke Arabic, French, English, all on your own," William insisted. "That's not luck, that's talent." He held out an envelope. "I need you to read this. It's a contract with the Arab investors. Something's off, but I can't figure out what." Liam took the envelope, curious. He opened the document and began reading, his eyes darting across the pages like someone decoding a secret message. After a few minutes, he looked up. "There's a hidden clause here," he said, pointing. "If you sign this, you'll lose 40% of the company after 1 year." William went pale. "How did you catch that?" "They changed the order of the words. In legal Arabic, one preposition changes everything," Liam explained. "I noticed because that's the kind of thing my mom used to tell me to watch for." The businessman ran a hand through his hair, stunned. "I was supposed to sign this tomorrow." "Yeah," Liam said, closing the folder. "Now you know why you need me." William took a deep breath. "No, Liam," he said softly. "Now I know why I need to learn from you." The next day, the meeting with Sheikh al-Rashid was set. Liam arrived beside William. No suit, no uniform, only steady eyes and a ready heart. This time he wasn't a boy begging for work. He was someone who knew his own worth. During the meeting, he calmly pointed out the flaws in the contract, explaining each technical detail with clarity. The Arab executives exchanged surprised glances. Al-Rashid stayed silent until the very end. When Liam finished, the sheikh rose and approached him. "You have saved a man and a company," he said solemnly. "And more than that, you've reminded me that character is the world's true universal language." Then he turned to William. "I will keep the investment," he announced. "But let it be known, I am not investing only in the Harrington Group. I am investing in this boy's future, and in the man he inspired you to become." The room fell silent. William, eyes glistening, shook the Arab's hand, then looked at Liam with a mixture of pride and gratitude. For the first time, the boy saw sincerity in the eyes of the man who had once embodied everything he despised. In the following days, the headlines changed tone. "New York prodigy saves billionaire empire. From airport floor to boardroom, the story of Liam Harrington." The cameras followed him, but now there was no mockery, only admiration. Liam remained the same, quiet, humble, still sleeping in his corner of the airport. But something inside him had changed. It wasn't money, it was dignity. A week later, William called a press conference. Flashes lit up his face as he stood before the reporters. Beside him was Liam, nervous, holding a sheet of paper. William cleared his throat, his voice steady but emotional. "For years, I believed my greatest legacy was in the planes I built, the companies I founded, and the wealth I accumulated." He paused, turning toward his son. "But the true legacy of my life stands right here," he said, placing a hand on Liam's shoulder. "A boy who learned the value of honesty before he even knew the meaning of home." The entire hall erupted in applause. Some people cried. Liam, embarrassed, smiled shyly. In the audience, Margaret Harrington watched quietly. Her eyes glistened, not with anger this time, but tenderness. After the reporters left, she approached them. "You have your mother's eyes," she said softly to Liam. He blinked, startled. "You knew her?" Margaret nodded. "Yes, she was kind, kinder than I deserved." She hesitated, breathing deeply. "I hated what happened, but I can't hate you." Liam lowered his gaze. "I'm not trying to take anyone's place." "You won't," she replied. "You'll simply take your own." Then she turned to her husband. "If this family is going to rebuild, let it start with him." And so, amid the ruins of scandal, something money could never buy was born: forgiveness. William wiped his tears, and Liam, for the first time, called him by the name he had never spoken aloud. "Dad." The businessman smiled. "Son." And in that embrace, without contracts, cameras, or promises, only truth, they both understood that the greatest inheritance was never written in blood, but in the love one chooses to give. Time passed, silent, like a plane slicing through the sky without leaving a trace. Months had gone by since the scandal that had shaken the country. But now the name Harrington no longer appeared in the headlines for controversy. It appeared next to a new word: hope. Liam now lived in a house he once only saw from the windows of a passing bus. The Harrington mansion, once cold and silent, had changed. Luxurious paintings had been replaced by family photos, and laughter now echoed through the hallways. Margaret, the woman who had once been a shadow in a perfect marriage, now smiled, genuinely. William, once a prisoner of his own pride, had become a different man, simpler, more human. And at the center of all that change stood Liam. Even living among luxury, he still woke before sunrise, just as he used to during the long nights at the airport. He liked the smell of morning coffee, the silence of studying before the world woke up. Now he attended one of the best schools in the country. His teachers were astonished by his hunger for learning. Math, languages, history, philosophy, everything fascinated him. But what drove him most was a dream: to help other children like the one he once was. One morning, Liam found Margaret in the garden tending to the flowers. "Aunt Margaret," he still called her that, out of respect. "Can I show you something?" She smiled. "Of course, my dear." Liam opened a notebook filled with notes, sketches, and plans. On the cover, written in steady letters, "The Emily Walker Foundation." "I want to build a place for street kids," he said, his voice full of energy. "A space where they can study, eat, sleep, but most of all, believe in themselves." Margaret listened intently. "And why your mother's name?" she asked softly. Liam looked up at the sky. "Because it all started with her. She taught me that knowledge is the only ticket no one can tear up." The words struck deep in Margaret's heart. "Then we'll make it happen," she said. "For her, for you, and for all the kids still waiting for their chance." Months later, the Emily Walker Foundation opened its doors. The building, funded by the Harrington Group and donations from Al-Rashid, rose near the airport, the very place where it had all begun. On the facade, a golden plaque bore a quote written by Liam: "Knowledge is the flight no wind can bring down." The opening day was emotional. Children from nearby communities filled the courtyard, wide-eyed at the computers, the books, the colorful classrooms. Liam, now wearing a uniform and tie, walked among them, greeting each one. William watched from a distance, tears glistening in his eyes. Beside him, Margaret squeezed his hand and whispered, "Emily would be proud." Sheikh Al-Rashid was there too. When he saw Liam speaking before the crowd, he smiled quietly, remembering the freezing night when the boy had stepped into a meeting room and changed everyone's destiny. Liam stepped onto the stage and spoke into the microphone, his voice steady, his heart open. I was born in the middle of airplane noise. While the world was boarding flights to faraway places, all I wanted was a destination to call my own. Today I've learned that knowledge is that destination. It can take you anywhere, even if you start from nothing. Applause thundered through the courtyard. But Liam wasn't speaking to the adults. He was speaking to the children, whose bright eyes reflected his every word. If anyone tells you that you can't, remember this. They said the same thing to me. And look where I am. That night, after the event ended, Liam walked alone toward the airport. The cool air of dawn brought memories rushing back. The same lights, the same metallic echo of suitcase wheels, the same smell of cheap coffee. It felt as if time had come full circle. He walked down the corridor where he used to sleep, now clean and quiet. At the main terminal, he stopped. There, in the same spot where he once stood selling candy, was another boy. Thin, barefoot, holding a box almost identical to the one Liam used to carry. Sharp eyes, wary stance, a look he knew too well. Liam approached slowly. The boy looked up, nervous. "Want to buy some, sir?" he asked timidly. Liam smiled. "Of course I do." He bought the whole box and handed him a bill. "Keep the change." The boy's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," Liam said, in the same calm tone Emily once used with him. "But only if you promise me one thing." "What thing?" "That you'll let me teach you English." The boy went silent for a moment, then grinned. "English? What for?" "So you can talk to the world," Liam said, extending his hand. "I'll show you the way." The boy took his hand. The two walked together down the bright corridor, surrounded by flight announcements and voices in a dozen languages. From a distance, they looked like father and son. But what united them was something greater: the invisible inheritance of knowledge and kindness. Liam looked up at the departures board and smiled. Now the names of the destinations were no longer unreachable promises. They were reminders that he had learned how to fly with his feet still firmly on the ground. And you? What did you think of this story? Tell me, who was the person who taught you to believe when everything seemed impossible? Write their name in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe so more people can feel the same.